So I knew that if I was making $91,000 a year, I would either spend it all because I still wasn't paying attention to it and like let that lifestyle creep sink in, or I could actually pay attention to it and decide, okay, where do I actually want my money to go? In 2018, when I got a new job, I had kind of recognized like, okay, I've been getting promoted every year. I've been making more money every year. And yet I'm still living paycheck to paycheck for the most part. I really haven't saved anything for retirement. I haven't saved an emergency fund. I haven't really done anything. And I say that I value things like travel and experiences, yet I don't have any opportunity to save any money and I don't have any opportunity to prioritize that. So when I got this new job, I was transferring out of the nonprofit industry and into the corporate world, working as a consultant. And it was a very significant pay increase. I think I went from like making maybe $67,000 a year to $91,000 a year. And so it was a big jump. And I was like, okay, I feel like I could probably become debt free if I really just paid attention to where my money was going. Because at the time I had about $70,000 in student loan debt. And I didn't even know what the interest rate was, but I found out the interest rate was like 8.88 something percent, which is extremely high for student loans. And so I was like, well, okay, let me just track where my money goes for 2 weeks and see what I'm actually spending my money on at the end of the day. And I was horrified. I was like spending $600 every 2 weeks on eating out, drinking, being hungover, and like just random things. And I was like, if I'm doing that every 2 weeks, and let's say that's $1,200 a month, and I'm just blowing on things that I wouldn't say I give high value to, but where our money goes is really, it shows where our values are. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to get on a budget. I'm going to start telling my money where to go. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll figure it out as I go. And I had already been writing on Chloé for a couple of years, but it wasn't money related at all. It was all just like relationships, mental health, personal growth, those kind of things. And I was like, well, I really want to get my money together. And that's just as important as things like mental health. Like those go hand in hand. And so I decided, you know what, I'm just going to start writing about my budget every month. I'm going to share my budget. I'm going to share what I did wrong. I'm going to share what went well. And it just kind of, that's how it started. And from there, I think a lot of people start their journey off trying to become debt free, because that's like an easy win. You don't really understand how to invest at that point. You don't really understand how to build wealth. So you just think, man, if I was debt free, I'd be in a better financial situation. But as I learned more and more, I was like, I don't just want to be debt free. Like I also want to build wealth. I don't want to just start at zero and be like debt free. I want to focus on how can I invest and how can I someday retire early. And so that's when I kind of stumbled into the financial independence retire early community, and it just kind of like snowballed from there. It was like you learn a little bit more and then you want to learn a little bit more and then you want to learn a little bit more.
Right.
And so now a little over 2 years later, it's definitely snowballed into something big, and now I'm teaching other people how to do it too.
When you were going through that career shift, it was almost just a coincidence, or that as you were trying to figure out what am I going to do with this extra money that I'm about to make, you realized what your existing lifestyle was. And is that when you thought, oh, wait a minute, it's not just the income surplus that's the solution here. There's a different problem here.
Well, yeah, because I knew that if I didn't start paying attention, I would just keep living paycheck to paycheck. I would end up spending all of that money. I knew, because I had proven that to myself. Here I was I started out in 2015, I started out making $41,000 a year, and I made at least $10,000 more every year until 2018, if not more. And I was like, I'm still blowing through all of that money. I'm not saving anymore. Every time I'd get a raise or a promotion, I'd be like, oh, now I can finally save some money or pay off my debt. And then it was just like, I never got to that point. So I knew that if I was making $91,000 a year, I would either spend it all because I still wasn't paying attention to it and like let that lifestyle creep sink in, or I could actually pay attention to it and decide, okay, where do I actually want my money to go? So I was really like, I don't want to just constantly be on this hamster wheel of spending more and more and more as I make more and more and more. And it's like, no, I want to get into a better place. And so I think for me, it was realizing I could be making six figures and still spending, I think there's a statistic out there that 24% of people who make over $100,000 a year still live paycheck to paycheck. And it's like, I don't want to do that. I want to figure out how to make my money work for me.
So once you realize I need to start tracking and I need to start improving, but as you said yourself, you didn't really know what to do.
Mhm.
You just wanted to figure it out. What happened next? What did you do?
Yeah, so I started reading a lot of blogs, and that's kind of how I discovered the personal finance community, but also more importantly, the FIRE community, the financial independence retire early community. So I started out with reading the J.L. Collins stock series. I started reading Millennial Revolution and started like learning how these people were doing it. And when I started reading their journeys, I was so jealous. I was like, oh my gosh, it's so cool that they get to do this. Like the Millennial Revolution couple, they retired in their 30s and have been traveling the world ever since. And it's like, oh, that's so cool. That's something I want to do. And I really believe that when you're jealous of something, the reason is because you want to be doing that. It's a very good indicator that that is something that you feel drawn towards. And so I was like, for a while, I was like, I couldn't do that. Like, I don't know how to invest. Like, that's not for me. Like, I just want to be debt free and then I'll figure out everything else. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, they can do it. I can do it. There's no
Right.
reason I can't do this too. So from there, it was just like, all right, I'm going to learn how to do this. I'm going to learn how to do this. With the budgeting thing, I was mostly self taught with the budgeting thing. I had tried Dave Ramsey before. I'm not a fan of Dave Ramsey at all. I had tried his envelope method because that was all I had heard of in the past. And that never worked for me because it was so general, so vague, and I didn't like using cash. And so I started just kind of experimenting. And what I learned was that if it was something that I wanted to pay attention to, like drinking and eating out and spending money on those things, then I needed a category for it. I needed to keep track of it because if I could keep track of it in a way, I could kind of control it. But I also wanted to make sure I was making it a priority to put money in places that I really cared about. So I made sure I was spending money on travel. I was spending money on paying off debt. I was spending money on investing. So it was kind of like the categories just formed out of the priorities that are in my life. But I didn't really learn that method from anyone in particular. It was just a lot of trial and error.